International Women's Day is a global celebration of women's achievements, regardless of their nationality, ethnicity, language, culture, economy or politics. There has been greater calls for the need to protect women's rights and prioritize their health. In sub-Saharan Africa, women and girls are disproportionately affected by HIV, which highlights the urgent need for action to address this issue. Now, let's discuss this. We are now joined via Teams by Tabita Ntuli, UNAIDS Community Support Adviser, South Africa. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time. So, of course, this being International Women's Day, it highlights just a number of advances that, we have made globally in as far as HIV is concerned. Just talk to us about, what is currently happening now, because we know that of all new, HIV infections in 2021, in fact, 49% were among women and girls. Tabita, please, can you unmute yourself? I think you're still muted.
I thought we had that right. Excuse me.
No
Thank you, Unati, for having me. Good afternoon to you and to the listeners, and thank you for that great question as well. And I want to angle my response to you by highlighting the status in South Africa, our current status as a country, and by giving you examples. But first, let me highlight the fact that South Africa has made great progress in advancing gender equality as far as women are concerned. Examples include the representation of women in parliament and the advancement of women in leadership positions, both in government, the private sector, and the public sectors. There's been a transformation in reaching gender parity and women holding influential positions. We have to mention that. However, gender-based violence remained pervasive in this country. In terms of HIV, women bear the disproportionate burden of the HIV epidemic in the country, with most new infections occurring among adolescent girls and young women. And adolescent girls and young women by age, we mean women between the ages of 15 to 24. So that is quite a concern. We are still grappling with that as a country. We have not been able to close the tap on new HIV infections. And it requires multi-sectoral interventions from all of us to ensure that we protect our young girls and women. Thanks.
And when you spread that net wider, and include sub-Saharan Africa, I mean, we hear that young women are twice as likely to have HIV than young men. And the question then becomes, what are we doing wrong, and where should we then, fix or provide solutions here?
So I think we know this, especially people that have worked in the AIDS movement for as long as possible. I think we need multi-sectoral approaches, much as we need multi-sectorality in interventions by bodies and government and people that have vested interest in the response. But we also need multi-sectoral approaches. We need to lift attention to the social and structural drivers of HIV. We really need to come together and ensure that we attend to this, because for as long as we don't put much investment on the social and structural drivers of the epidemic, we are going to struggle. It's going to take us a while longer to get to where we need to get and to achieve the 2030 goals as set out in the SDGs. And the solutions would be to really let's keep our young girls at school until they matriculate, because we have data. We're sitting with data that's proven to us that if we keep young girls in school, we are able to slash their chances of acquiring HIV by 50%. And we do this by looking after the interest of the girl child with and outside of school, because these are social, women are social people. They come in as whole people. They don't only come in as seeking education in the school environment. And there are factors that affect them from being at school and performing and thriving in the school environment that do not necessarily have to do with the education in the school environment. So my quick response to you would be women and girls should lead. They have to lead the struggles for equality and rights, and they must continue doing so, because we've seen that happen and it's given us positive results in other countries in the world. Women standing up against oppression in their homes, workplaces, and communities. And women can't do this alone, all by themselves. We need men and boys to join and champion these efforts. Women's movements that are providing direct support to women and girls who face violence and are marching and striking for equality. We see this in the world and we acknowledge this. And that is why we really, really need to do the best we can to ensure that women's movements are resourced and supported politically and in our communities to do the work that they do. And just lastly, to protect women's rights, it is vital to support and resource these community organizations, civil society groups, and women's organizations. These are the frontline defenders of those rights. I've just stressed the importance of this from the point I made earlier on.
And I mean, you make valid points, Tabita, but the problem then becomes, why are we still sitting with this problem? Because, I mean, as you rightfully say, there are frameworks, legislative frameworks in terms of protecting girls. There are those SDG goals that we are also ascribed to, but yet you still find young children, being kept away from school because of the escalating problem of teenage pregnancies in South Africa, for one. I mean, just the other day, we were talking about how teenage girls as young as 10, 14 years old, being pregnant. And of course, we are talking here in that instance, likely the possibility of rape. And then they don't go back to schools. So they kept away from going back to schools because we still do not have, those environments that are conducive enough for them to go back to school. So with that said, I mean, how then do we hold those that are in power accountable? Particularly because these frameworks, legal frameworks, do exist.
I, as a South African, just like you, Unati, sitting where I am, and as much as I've worked in the AIDS response since the beginning, literally, I grapple with that. My struggle is a struggle with how do we do this together. But I think we have proven by how we have delivered on the national strategic plans of HIV, TB, and STIs in this country that it can be done. If South Africa could put people living with HIV, the 8 million people that are living with HIV on treatment, it can be done. Because a huge proportion of that, around 6 million of those people, are on ARVs. So we have got to really, the political commitment is very important, but real change happens in the communities. South African communities have been leading the AIDS response. We have so much lessons learned in the AIDS movement that we can't sit and not go back to that wisdom and see how we did things in the past that have given us positive results. So I think it's about us, the recommitment by governments, by political leadership, but also the reinvigoration of our communities, going back to the communities and really allowing communities to lead the response, and resourcing our communities, allowing women from the communities to lead these efforts, empowering both young men and young girls to do what is right all of the time, because there is no one size fits all. We need a myriad of tested interventions. We have data that has proven to us that this can be done. There are interventions that can be successfully implemented in South Africa, and we might just look at a different picture if we have this conversation again. And I want to paint a picture to you that might not be really the reality of where we are as a country. And I do hope I have partly responded to your question, but with your question, I want to add this light that we are far from reaching gender equality and HIV targets that are outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals. At the current pace, it is estimated that it will take 300 years to end child marriage globally. It will take 140 years for women to achieve equal representation in positions of power and leadership in the workplace. And it's going to take us 47 years to attain equal representation in national parliaments. So with these facts and this data, it really gives us no time but to act and ensure that women's rights are protected, that girls' rights are protected, that we look after them. Thank you.